Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to Germany once again, and we're going to continue on with this little mini-series of German beer reviews that I've been doing for you over the last few videos. Now, as I've mentioned in previous reviews in this kind of mini-series, if you like, the whole idea behind this is that I'd like to familiarise myself a little bit more with styles that I do know but just haven't tried all that many examples of. And we've been doing that quite nicely, I think, in the last few videos. It's been really cool to have a look at some of these beers. Now, the one that we're going to have a look at today is a style that I really do quite enjoy. I'm a big fan of the kind of more malty brown styles of beer, as you might know if you've watched the channel for any length of time. So this one is right up my street. But it's another very well-known brewery that I haven't covered on the channel before, so I'm quite curious to see what their interpretation of this particular style is going to be like. So needless to say, very curious to see what it's going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to return to Düsseldorf, and we're going to have a look at my first beer from Brauerei Gatz, or Brauerei Gatz as they've been known previously. So this beer is of course the Gatz Altbier. It comes in at 4.8% ABV, and as the name suggests, this one is another Düsseldorf Altbier, which is an ale, of course, but a lovely kind of more malty type thing. Not a million miles away in terms of flavour profile from the German Dunkel. So yeah, for me the main differences in terms of the alt beers versus the German Dunkels, I would say that these are a little bit thicker in their mouthfeel. They have a little bit more kind of oiliness to them as well, I would say. But yeah, flavour profile wise, if you like a German Dunkel, the chances are that you will also enjoy a Düsseldorf alt beer. So yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see what it's going to have in store for us. Definitely nice to be able to try some Düsseldorf brewed examples of the alt beers. I've had one or two of these from different countries before making this little mini series, and it's a style that's always quite interested me, but they're just very difficult to come across outside of Germany, or even outside of the Düsseldorf area in fact. So yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done, or will do in the future I should say, from Brauerei Gatz. This is the very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I've mentioned, but there's all the usual social media down there if you want to see more reviews. Do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that, of course, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the German playlist along with a number of other things, and we are of course adding to that fairly regularly on the channel at the moment. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a little bit about the history of Brauerei Gatz and the Gatz brand, if you like. So the Gatz Altbier brand is today produced by Bolton, but it was originally associated with Brauerei zum Schlüssel in Düsseldorf. So that's basically Key Brewery, I think it would translate to in English. But this brewery can be found on Bolkestraße, and it occupies numbers 43 to 47. And this company was taken over by Karl Gatzweiler in 1936, and he came from a family in Neuss that had been active in the brewing industry since the 14th century, and it is still the descendants of this family that are in charge of the brewery today. But in 1963, the Gatzweiler family built a large modern brewery in Düsseldorf-Hirt, where they produced the Schlüssel Alt in addition to the Gatzweiler Alt, which obviously is known as Gatz these days, and this was a brand produced on a larger scale than the Schlüssel beers. But in 1977, the brewery reached an output of 530,000 hectolitres, and they continue to produce around the same level for the following years. But in 1990, the restaurant and main brewery were extensively renovated, but throughout the 1990s, sales began to fall, and so they decided to sell the brewery in Hirt and simply operate the small brewery in the Düsseldorf Altstadt. But today, Brauerei Schlüssel produces only the Schlüssel brand of beers. They produce around 20,000 hectolitres of beer per year, and their beer is sold mainly in the Düsseldorf area because of this, the relatively small volume in comparison with other German breweries. But a special feature of Brauerei Schlüssel is that they have a beer garden in the churchyard of the Neanderkirche, which is just opposite the brewery. But they have their own yeast, which is a trade secret, and farms in Ratingen as well, which grow grain exclusively for them. So you are getting exclusive malt in those beers. But the Gatz beer was originally called, as I mentioned earlier, Gatz Altbier, but this was later shortened simply to Gatz Alt. And the Gatz brand was sold to Carlsberg at the same time that the Hirt brewery was sold, and it's brewed at Brauerei Königshof in Krefeld. But in April of 2022, the Hannen Alt and Gatz Altbier brands were bought by Bolton Brewery, an old art beer brewery dating from back in 1266, under the direction of Michael Holman, who had previously been managing director of the Hannen Brewery, and these brands are now brewed independently, but are still distributed by Carlsberg. And we reviewed the Hannen Alt, of course, a few videos ago, which you saw. So I will need to have a little look at some of the Bolton beers and see what we can review from them. But yeah, these guys, I couldn't find an exact volume on how much Gatz Altbier is actually produced these days, but these guys are one of the kind of big brands when it comes to the Düsseldorf Altbiers. So yeah, we will need to have a little look at a few more of these beers when I do eventually make it over to Düsseldorf. As I've said before, that is one of the goals I would like to have for the channel, is to get over to Düsseldorf and go and film at the brewery restaurants of all the famous Düsseldorf Altbier brewers, and of course find some of the smaller, lesser known ones too. And we also want to do the same in Cologne and have a look at the Kölschis, and go up to Dortmund as well and have a little look at some of the Dortmunder Helles breweries too. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about the Gatz Altbier and the Gatzweiler Brauerei and Brauerei zum Schlüssel as well. So yeah, hopefully that gives you an idea of their history. But yeah, let's go on then and have a little look at the beer itself. If you want to learn more, do check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram and things like that. I'll put some of the links down in the video description for you below. But a little quick look then at the artwork on the bottle with this one. As you can see, it's a kind of standard German half-litre bottle, this one. So you can see there is the lovely old school Gatz label. I wonder if this is like a drawing of the original brewery, in fact. This little symbol up here, I'm guessing it probably is, but you can see that's also on the little top label there, and the bottle cap is of course actually quite plain on this one compared to some of the other ones, but the camera is hating it because the light's just reflecting off it, of course. But as we mentioned earlier, this one comes in at 4.8% ABV. It is an alt beer. This one, to tell you a little bit of a technical thing about the style, this is an ale rather than a lager. So the main difference, of course, between lagers and alt beers is the type of yeast they use, and thus the fermentation temperature. So lagers tend to ferment at lower temperatures using bottom fermenting yeast. We're talking about 8 to 12 degrees Celsius, whereas ales will ferment using top fermenting yeasts at higher temperatures, usually between say like 15 and 18 degrees Celsius. But when it comes to the alt beers as well as the Kölschis, I believe that these beers are actually rather low fermentation, low temperature fermentation ales in fact. But yeah, I'm not overly familiar with the technical side of the brewing when it comes to these ones. I've never homebrewed any of these styles, so maybe that's something I do need to look into a little bit and look at some recipes and things to learn a wee bit more about. You can learn a lot from doing that actually. But yeah, let's get this guy out then and get on with the tasting of it. The Gatz Altbier at 4.8% ABV. Let's do this. So we'll give it a wee bit of a more kind of aggressive pour just to try and get some nice head on it, which is of course what you want with German beer. You do want a nice little bit of a foamy head on these things. I think that is going to be very nice in fact. We've maybe given it a bit too much of an aggressive pour this time. but we'll just need to see how it goes. I think that's quite nice. There's still a little bit in the bottom of the bottle, but we'll put that in a wee bit later on. But yeah, anyway, you can see that this beer has poured pretty much as you would expect of it's poured pretty much as you would expect of an alt beer. Actually, I really do like how that's turned out. So before the head disappears on this one, we can say that it's poured with about a 2, slightly more than 2 and a bit finger of a frothy, I would say very light fawn coloured head there. It does look very, very nice. So you can see there's a smaller kind of foamy, there's smaller foamy bubbles there toward the surface of the liquid, but a few kind of bigger and bumpier ones the further up that you go. But yeah, I have to say it does look pretty damn nice actually, this one. In terms of the colour of this beer, I'm not sure how well you guys are kind of seeing that, but for me, if I shine the light through this, it's a lovely kind of slightly stained mahogany type colour. Light chestnut would also be another way to describe this one. It's actually pretty clear. You can see that this beer is not really opaque at all, but 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a steady stream of things just going up toward the bottom of the head there. But overall, it does look pretty nice. Remember though, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. 1, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts that you put into the beer will affect its colour too. You don't have to care about that very often with alt beers though. But yeah, let's have a wee look at the aroma of this one then and see what it's all about. I think we've said everything that we really need to about the actual appearance of this. Nothing untoward about that when you consider what style this beer is. So I have to say the head retention on this is pretty decent actually. So let's look at the aroma and just see what it's all about. This is pretty damn nice actually. This one's quite interesting. I mean, I was talking earlier about how this beer, this style of beer, it's not a million miles away from, in terms of flavour profile, from a German Dunkel. Just on the aroma, this one's a little bit more like a kind of Märzen or Vienna lager actually. So maybe that statement that I made earlier was a little bit premature. So we'll see how we go. But aroma-wise, this kind of gives you everything that you would expect of the alt beer. You've got a lovely little bit of kind of bready character in there, kind of brown bready notes, some brown sugars as well, a lovely little bit of toastiness, kind of dry fruit, and also just a little bit of that kind of typical German noble hoppiness coming out of it too. It smells lovely, it really does. Let's just try and break that down then and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth if you like. So, the backbone of this beer, you absolutely have a nice little bit of a kind of fresh rye bready bread crust just forming the backbone of that beer. You do get a little touch of an almost rye bready type character out of it, but you do get quite a bit of sweetness in there as well, which is a wee bit more akin to, say, a German pumpernickel bread or something like that. Beyond that, you do have a little bit more of a, kind of wholemeal, brown bready type character coming out of this one, which I think is great. So yeah, brown bready bread crust, wholemeal kind of brown bready character above that, or sorry, the kind of rye bread, pumpernickel bread, and then wholemeal bread. You really have 3 layers of bread in this one. I would say that there's a little bit of kind of woodiness coming out of this one too. There is a little bit of a nice kind of woody character in there, and you also have a wee touch of, there is also just a wee touch of nuttiness as well, and you get more and more of that into the aftertaste. But above everything else, you do start to get a little bit more of a, above everything else, you do start to get a little bit of the brown sugar coming out of this one. So there's a wee touch of a kind of toasty, yeah, there is a little touch of that kind of toasty brown sugary sort of thing going on. And then you have straight up caramel, of course, but then there's almost a wee bit of kind of biscuity character coming out of this beer too. So it's very layered in the malty side of things. As we said, we've got a bit of bread crust, a bit of wood, little touch of nuttiness, rye bread, pumpernickel, wholemeal brown, toasty brown sugar, sweet caramel, and of course McVitie's digestive biscuit as well. I do really like how everything pieces together in this one. It's the malty side of this is really quite nice, but it isn't quite the other one that we tried. The Hanen Alt had quite a little bit of kind of leathery brown sugar to it, I found. Yeah, that was pretty interesting, I have to say. Yeah, interesting malt base this one, I have to say, but I do like it. In terms of the hoppy side of things then, this beer is pretty much what you would expect from, you know, Hallertau or Tettnang hops. I'm not sure what they'll be using, but German noble hops have a few distinctive characteristics in any case. You get a lovely little bit of kind of smooth earthiness out of this one. So yeah, as I say, a lovely little bit of smooth earthiness in there. You do get a little bit of as I say, a little bit of smooth earthiness in there. You do get a nice little bit of you do get a little touch of herbal character coming out of it, and then you get some nice sort of floral aromaticity and a wee bit of kind of grassy character coming out of this one too, which is absolutely great. So yeah, yeah, I mean, these are all things that you would expect of this. For me, it's quite smooth. The earthiness and the herbal character comes out a little bit more in this one, which is in keeping with the sort of malty side of the beer. As I say, a little bit of grassiness and floral character too. But on top of that, you've got quite a wee bit of fruity note, which is great. So for me, the fruity side of things in this beer is again what you'd expect. There's a lovely little bit of a kind of oily, peary type thing out of this one, which I would say kind of makes sense. So yeah, a little bit of sultana, almost, maybe a very slight touch of date as well, but oily pear, definitely. Oily pear, and then just a very slight, like blackcurrant or something. There's a very slight hint of red fruity character to this one, but yeah, mainly oily pear, sultana, and a little touch of datey character too. So yeah, the way that everything pieces together in this one, I think, is really quite nice. As I always say, take a wee bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. I think that's always half the experience when it comes to craft beers and whiskies and stuff like that. But I think it is about time that we have a taste of this one and just see what it's all about. So yeah, this one is the Gatz Altbier, known formally, of course, as the Gatzweiler Alt, or Gatzweiler Altbier, however we're going to say it, from Brauerei Gatz in Düsseldorf, a 4.8% alt beer. So let's get stuck in. Slange, Skål, cheers, Prost. Yeah, to say that's pretty nice. Compared to the Hanen Alt, this is it strikes me as being a lot drier, a lot more kind of grainy in its bready character as well, and then you start to get more and more of the sweetness out of this one the later, the further into the aftertaste you go. It's an interesting beer, this one, actually, but it just, again, it kind of goes to show you how different the style can vary between breweries, actually. And yeah, if we compare it to the German Dunkel, the Vienna Lager and the Märzen, think about these particular styles, it's probably a little bit more leaning. It reminds me a little bit more, it's like if you cross the Dunkel with the Vienna Lager, I think that's probably a good place that you to kind of to place this one on the scale, if you like. But of course they are lagers and not ales like this one. Yeah, this was really interesting for sure. So yeah, for me this is pretty damn good. It gets a thumbs up from me. Definitely a lot more grainy and dry in comparison to the Hanen that we had before, and also it just gives you that little bit more The fruity character is a little bit drier. It's just really a drier alt beer and more grainy alt beer overall, I would say. But I like this. This is quite nice. I'd love to try this kind of fresh on tap and see what it's like there. But yeah, let's do as we always do then and just break this beer down and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth. So, middle third of your palate then. The backbone of the beer is absolutely that lovely kind of sort of wholemeal rye bready type bread crust. So yeah, wholemeal rye bready type bread crust coming out of this one. And that, as I say, goes together really nicely. Further forward on that middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of woodiness coming out of this one, little touch of nuttiness sitting on top of that. But yeah, lovely kind of rye bready bread crust, just pushing its way out of the beer. That is really quite nice in this one. Yeah. And that lingers there into the aftertaste, and you get more and more of that sort of rye bready bread crust in there. But yeah, above the kind of rye bread crust, you start to get a little bit of a more, you do start to get a wee bit more of a kind of, like you do get a little bit of that kind of drier rye bready character in the very base of the beer, which is nice. And as you move above that, you start to get you absolutely start to get more of a, you can feel in the next layer up you have a kind of sweeter pumpernickel type bready quality, and then in the next layer up you have a sort of kind of wholemeal brown bready type character coming out of the beer. And all of these kind of just go together really well. I do like how all of these flavours piece together with this particular beer actually, so that gets a big thumbs up from me as well. So yeah, I think yeah, it's very, as I say, you've got the crust, the rye, the pumpernickel, the wholemeal brown. You've got a wee touch of a kind of, further forward on that middle third of your palate, you do start to get a little touch of nuttiness coming out of this beer, which I think is really interesting too. And that again lingers into the aftertaste with the more bread crusty notes, actually. But above all of the bready characters, you start to get some of the brown sugary notes in this one, and this is quite interesting. So you've got a kind of toasty brown sugary base there, so yeah, more toasty brown sugary character coming out of there. Then on top of that you have on top of that you have a little bit more of a kind of, you've got a little bit of the toasty brown sugar, then a more kind of leathery layer coming out of this one. Yeah, so a kind of toasty, you've got the toasty layer, a slightly leathery layer, but then it's actually, this beer does have a nice little bit of sweetness to it, but it's almost like a slightly treacly type sweetness, which is kind of interesting. So in that little circle that you get, in the middle of your palate there, you can feel it's got a little bit more a treacly kind of boozy type thing, but this is only 4.8% ABV. It's quite a drinkable beer, but yeah, you still get that bit of that darker treacly molassesy type quality coming out of it. But yeah, the way that goes together is really quite nice. Above all of that, you get a wee bit of a, you do get a little bit of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing coming out of this one. So yeah. So the way that goes together, I would say, is really quite nice. For me, the I think that covers everything we really need to say about the middle third of your palate in this beer. So we can probably move on and have a little look at the back third of your palate then. As I've often said, the back third of your palate will give you similar flavours to the middle third of your palate, just at different intensities. But do remember that trend with a beer, that the further forward on the palate you go, the sweeter the flavours you're going to get will be, but the further back you go, the kind of drier and more bitter that they'll be. So yeah, in that border region between middle and back third of your palate, you do get a little touch of a kind of bready build up in there, sort of rye bready character in the base, kind of wholemeal brown bready character on top of that. But then in the base of that back third of your palate, you've got the really dry, almost slightly toasty in this case, bread crust. It's even drier than it is before. You've got a little bit of cracker sitting above that. Then you've got you've got the rye bready character there, which feels a little bit taller and a little bit more airy. Then you get the pumpernickel bread above that, which feels a little bit taller and a little bit more airy. And then you've got the wholemeal brown bready character, which just sits above that as well. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together in that regard is really quite nice, and that gets a thumbs up from me. So yeah. I do like how all of this just pieces together actually. So yeah, in terms of the top, above all that bready character, you can feel some of the kind of drier and roasty toastier aspects of the brown sugars just creep over the top and sit there. But then above everything else, you do have a little bit of, as I say, you do get a little bit of yeasty character out of this one, and the yeasty character in this beer is quite interesting. So it feels like a little bit more of a kind of dense wholemeal brown bready character. You've got some sweet kind of honeycomb around that, but then you've also got a little bit. You've also got a little bit of. You do have a little touch of, I would say, just a wee bit of honeycomb or something. I always get a little bit of honeycomb on the back when it comes to the yeasty flavours in beers, but there's a little bit more of a woody and kind of grainy type bready character there. But for sure, the back third of your palate is, the flavour on that is taller, and then as you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, for me, that goes together really nicely. So yeah, quite happy with that. Yeah. In terms of the hoppy side of things, then I think it's time to move on to that. In the back corners of the palate, you do have actually quite a little bit of earthiness coming out of this one, which is interesting. That lingers there into the aftertaste too, which builds a good bridge with the more kind of grainy, bready side of the beer. As you move further forward, it's a little bit more herbal, and as you push toward the kind of front corners of the palate, you've got a little bit more kind of floral aromaticity coming out of this beer, which I think is really quite nice as well. But yeah, that is definitely interesting. So as I say, a little bit of earthiness in there, a little bit of herbal character, then lovely big kind of floral aromatic notes there, but not too floral. It is more of an oily floral character, and then round the front curve of your palate, it's definitely a little bit more kind of oily and grassy, and very slightly zesty as well, I would add. But yeah, the hoppy character adds a little bit more depth to the beer, as I often say. Pardon me, getting a bit of gas off this one. Yeah, there we go. So, yeah, let's move on and have a little look at the front third of your palate then, and the fruity side of the beer. So for me, border region between front third and middle third of your palate on this one, you get a nice little bit of kind of bready build up once again. It's a little bit more of the kind of pumpernickel bread in the base, and the wholemeal bready character sitting above that. In the base of the front third of your palate, toasty bread crust, a little bit of the pumpernickel bread again, then the wholemeal bread, and then you've got that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So yeah, let's look at those fruity things. So for me, the fruity side of the beer is quite it's quite interesting. At the back of that front third of your palate, you do get a little bit more of a. At the back of that front third of your palate, there's a little bit of a kind of. There's definitely sultana and kind of date in there. I get a little bit of that dry datey kind of character. but underneath that you've got some nice oily sultana, you know, dry white green grapes. Then as you move further forward, as you move further forward from that, you start to get a little bit more of a, you can feel it gets a little bit drier, but then you start to get some lovely oily peary characters as you reach the middle of that front third of your palate. And then as you move further forward, the oily pear kind of stays there. But you do, this beer, I wouldn't say it has, I thought in the aroma it had a little touch of like blackcurrant or something like that. This one has the tiniest little hint of that, but not overly much for me. It's all about this beer and the aftertaste. It's really oily pear that you get. You get the kind of grainy side of the kind of rye bread and the pumpernickel kind of mixing together, and then you've got a little bit of the earthy herbal hoppy character kind of lingering with us. The fruity notes in this are really, yeah, mostly pear and sultana. But there is, as I say, a tiny little bit of blackcurrant on the impact as you take this beer in. But it's interesting, this one. It's definitely, compared to the other one we tried, the Hannon, this is absolutely more, it's absolutely got more of a kind of grainy, rye bready Vienna lager type quality to it. So I find that really interesting too. Yeah, interesting stuff. So, in terms of the flavour then, I think that's everything we really need to say. Let's round off with a wee look at the mouthfeel. For me, this beer, it's bottom end of mid-bodied. The carbonation has a degree of crispness to it. Overall, I would say that the beer has a little bit of slickness and smoothness and oiliness, which I do really quite enjoy. But then you also have, you do have quite a little bit of you do have quite a little bit of hoppy character to this one too. I wouldn't be surprised if this is slightly higher in bitterness. Maybe could be 30 IBUs, but it's, you know, it's easy enough to mix up the dryness and the bitterness in this one too. So I wouldn't be surprised if the dryness that you get from the malt base and the bitterness in this one from the hops are kind of mixing together a wee bit. But the malt base, as we said, it's a bit toasty and dry underneath. You've got a bit of smoothness in the middle, and this beer, rather than having that sweetness within the bread, which many German beers do, this one actually gives you quite a little bit of dryness. You've got a dry sweetness from the brown sugars on top of that, and it's the dryness that kind of lingers into the aftertaste there. But on the fruity side of things, this one is really quite nice and oily, I would say, and I do like how everything kind of just pieces together in this one. I think this beer is it's really nicely done from that perspective. The fruity side of this beer is quite dry and quite oily, I would say. So yeah, gets a thumbs up from me, I have to say. Yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one, to be honest with you. This has been a really interesting beer to try, and it's kind of shown me another dimension of the Altbier as a style, which was one of the ideas behind doing this little mini-series of German beer reviews, namely Kulsch's, Altbiers and Dortmunder Helles. But yeah, I've enjoyed this one. So yeah, this was the Gatz Altbier, which is whatever you want to call it, coming in at 4.8% ABV from Brauerei Gatz in Düsseldorf in Germany. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Brauerei Gatz as well are, and I will chat to you guys again very soon with more beer reviews. Check out my social media, check out Brauerei Gatz social media, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and prost.